Hi, it's Ken. Welcome to this week's Frequently Asked Spiritual Questions video. This one comes from another member of the community. I asked for permission to share this person's name and didn't receive an email back, but the question is extraordinary, I think. So I want to share the email without the name. Thanks for the great awakening story. This is the same email, actually, that inspired Edward's question. So there's a link in the description to that blog. I'm letting go of a business that is taking care of me financially, also has exhausted me 35 years. Time to let go and throw a new ball. I have accumulated a ton of inventory, which I need to sell. The game. I need to create a new going towards game versus getting away from existing life. To imagine more doing art, traveling, helping others. Any suggestions on letting go and living a fuller life? I love this question. It's such a powerful question. The only question is, am I going to be able to answer this succinctly? We'll see. So, of course, I'm full of ideas about how to do this, but let's see if we can't, at least this week, if we can't just sink down to the bare essence. I know in my life, it's been incredibly helpful when I understand the core themes, when I understand the building blocks in consciousness that are inviting me to integrate, that are supporting my growth, that are leading to greater awareness, as well as those aspects in consciousness that are holding me. I don't know that they're holding me back. They're inviting me to explore something at a deeper level until I really integrate what's there to be integrated. And so I want to answer this question from a couple of different perspectives. There are many more resources that I have available talking about the stages of consciousness, and I'll link those in the description. And I want to just share very briefly about the stages of consciousness here to set up my answer, because without a discussion about the stages of consciousness, I think the answer doesn't have any traction, right? Because it changes depending on which stage of consciousness we're in our life. So very quickly, we're all born in stage 0, God consciousness. We remember and experience what is real. We experience and understand as best we can. Of course, we're newborns, so difficult to put language to that, but we're having an intimate experience of our connection with the divine. And one example of this, it's easy for most of us to recognize, is just to think of a young person, maybe remember your own youth, when you had an imaginary friend. They weren't actually imaginary, but other people couldn't see them. So you gave that label, or the young person you're thinking of has used that label. They're not imaginary, they're real. There's this intimate connection. There's an incredible wisdom that's present in very young children. And I see that as an artifact of God consciousness. At some point, we fall away is what it feels like. I think this is actually described metaphorically in the Bible. We fall away into what I refer to as victim consciousness. And we're having an experience in victim consciousness, actually, of God having abandoned us, forgotten about us, punishing us. We have an experience of other people having the power. And most importantly, that we don't have the power. We're sort of a victim of circumstance and of other people. Some people have power over others. They've done something to appease the divine and somehow acquired that power, etc. Lots to say about this, but just to keep it succinct. The next stage of consciousness I refer to as controlling or manifestor consciousness. And the transition between victim to controlling consciousness is profound. It's about taking responsibility. It's about realizing I have a role in the experience, in the way I'm interpreting and the experience of my life. It's a pretty profound change. I go from having no power to all the power. Now God is my servant. God does as I command. It's a really extraordinary developmental process. And there's an identification with the empowered separate self and controlling consciousness. In victim consciousness, there's an identification with the disempowered separate self. And then there's a move into conduit consciousness. Again, really profound transformation that's available. And in that integrative dynamic, a developmental dynamic, really, there's an opportunity to accept complete responsibility. One of the things that happens in controlling consciousness is the glass ceiling. There's only so much I can create through control. Even if I can literally have everything I want, the material goods, the experiences, the relationships I want, they're not actually going to deliver what my empowered separate self thinks they will. Never met somebody for whom that was true. I actually think universally that it's simply not possible for the empowered separate self to solve the problem it's trying to address, except to accept complete responsibility for its role and to recognize that even intention or even at some level mantras, believe it or not, are a form of control. It's like saying, God, I need my life to be this way, and I don't really trust you can handle this, so do it the way I want you to do it. I'm still in charge, the separate self. So I surrender and I open to divine presence, to divine will. I actually become God's servant now. A really profound transformation. And then, of course, in the fourth stage of consciousness is union consciousness, which actually contains within it the prior stages of consciousness. Here's why that's important for answering this question, this very powerful question. Because the answer depends on the stage of consciousness. So the question to me is indicating the person who's asking the question is not in victim consciousness. It sounds to me like a question being asked either in manifestor consciousness or even potentially in conduit consciousness. And I think the answer actually is the same either way, because if we're in a place where we're thinking, I've got the power to create the life of my dreams, the realization that is either coming up likely or will be coming up is I'm changing something. I was doing this life that wore me out but paid the bills, and now I want to do something different that's more fulfilling. How can I create that? The answer actually lies not in the separate I, but in the whole I. That is to say, the whole self. And the access to the whole self comes when we let go of control. And so this is a clear answer in conduit consciousness, already having surrendered. How do I open to a new game, a new dynamic where I'm moving towards and opening up to something that's in flow and resonance? I recognize those experiences of dissonance are showing me this is where I'm holding on to control, and this is then illuminating some aspect where I get to surrender and let go of control more completely and allow the divine to come in and express through me, as me, in every part of my life. In controlling consciousness, there's all this sort of stage 2 consciousness, controlling consciousness metaphysics that would say, here's how to write the prescription for this, right? To visualize it, to dream it, to then continually hold the visualization and let go of the idea of how it's going to happen, but hold on to the what. To be more clear, what I'm suggesting is that actually not just the how, but the what is surrendered as well, with the recognition that the divine's expression as you is much more expansive and complete than anything you could dream up for what that would mean for you. No matter how fulfilled or unfulfilled you might be. If you're fulfilled, you might think, well, more of the same, but that then is a limiting idea. If you're unfulfilled, you're thinking, I don't want this and I want it to look like this. Again, still a limited idea, limited by imagination and past experience. The definition of what is wanted in the context of not this. Either way, if I hold a clear vision of what I want, or I'm responding to some adverse condition and I want something else, either way, that is effectively a stop sign for the divine. Okay, so here's the answer. It's just back to basic spirituality. It's like spirituality 101 for me, or spiritual mastery 101, the structure that I have received and explore and teach, where embodiment is one of those practices of spiritual mastery. In this sort of back to basics dynamic, it's all about uncovering that place within, that place of peace within. Not describing it or pushing it, but opening to it, excavating down to uncover it. And as we uncover it, we learn how to be present with it, and then we learn how to integrate that, and we learn how to open up and allow that expression to expand into every aspect of our lives. Now, here's the great thing about this, and maybe this is already coming up for you. That process of opening up is guaranteed to push the buttons of the separate self, because the separate self is saying, wait a second, if I'm not in charge, then this horrible thing that it's projecting onto the future is going to happen. I need to have my hand in it. Not so. If we allow ourselves to attend to those fears, the things we're afraid of, and really face into those and open up to divine presence as it expresses in our lives, that process, which is very, at some level, simple and extraordinary, begins to expand through every aspect of our being. And the natural outflow of that includes every part of our lives, including, if we are still in a place where this is an important part of life or are drawn to do this, how we interact with the world in our business, in our calling, in our avocation. So, yeah, there's a lot more I can say about this, but for me, it's the basics. It's back to the basics. It's back to, I want to experience the divine within. I want to open to the relationship that results from that experience of the divine. I want to begin uncovering all aspects of the intuitive guidance system that is my body. I don't mean this me, Ken. I mean me, all of us. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm just thinking about it in terms of my experience to offer a more complete answer. And that way I'm not saying you, right? But it's available within us all. It is universally available. We can open to that experience of our bodies as a component of our intuitive guidance system and a component of our intuitive faculty, which we all have, no matter what experiences you've had. It's just a component of that relationship of our connection with the divine. Doesn't matter what our belief system is, our religious background, all these things are totally congruent. You can have these experiences in the context of your beliefs without a doubt and open to a deeper experience of the divine. And then as that vertical embodiment begins to integrate and embody at a deeper and deeper level, then there's another component or another aspect of horizontal embodiment. That is to say, as I uncover divine presence within me and it integrates, now I begin to explore how I explore or share or allow that divine presence into my relationship with others and be present there as well. That's what I mean when I use the term spiritual messenger. That's why I believe we're all spiritual messengers. We all have within us an equal measure, an equal connection to the divine, and that divine presence expresses then fully, if we allow it, and there's a way to do that consciously in our interactions with other human beings. Right there. That's the definition of a spiritual messenger. Whatever we do beyond that, as mothers, as fathers, sons and daughters, siblings, and also just as human beings in the world. It's not about our familial relationships. It's not about our professional roles or our volunteer identity or any of this. Simply to be in the world as an embodied messenger. What an incredible question. I appreciate it to the individual who submitted this. And I'm really curious what my thoughts on this question bring up for you. I'd love for you to share those in the comments below. If you have a question you'd like to submit for consideration, there's a link in the description so you can do that. If you like this video, I invite you to give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel. I also invite you to join our community by heading over to kenwstone.com and adding your name and email address and registering for the newsletter. Look forward to being back with you again very soon. Peace.